you ever been interviewed and asked that dreaded question, describe yourself? What do you say? I mean, imagine you really want the job. At that point, your dilemma is clear. You need to sound perfectly humble, but also absolutely omnicompetent. It's a very difficult line to walk, isn't it? When you're asked to describe yourself, and maybe you just want to dodge the whole question and say, oh look, just ask my friends, ask my colleagues, look at my track record. It can be really hard to describe yourself. But Moses has the nerve to interview the Most High God and to ask him that thorny question. So Lord, describe yourself. Actually, the words he uses are in Exodus chapter 33, verse 18. He says, now show me your glory. I wonder what Moses expected to see. The glory of the living God. What would that look like? Dazzling special effects, breathtaking displays of raw power. That's not what Moses gets. No, here is how God reveals his glory. He responds in verse 19, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I'll have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. This is the Lord's glory. Goodness, mercy, compassion. And it's all summed up in his name. His name is his divine character. And it's what the Lord promises to proclaim next time he visits Moses. Well, in Exodus 34, it's next time. And we see the unseen Lord coming down to describe himself, to proclaim his name. He descends to the top of Mount Sinai in a cloud, and this is his name. Verse 6, 34 verse 6, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, that's long-suffering, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. So right here, at the heart of God's name, his character, we have this phrase, slow to anger, or in the older translations, it was rendered long-suffering. Long-suffering is the word that was invented by that very brave 16th century Bible translator, William Tyndale. We have him to thank for the word long-suffering entering into the English language. He came up with the word as he was translating from Galatians chapter 5, and he had to come up with a word to translate one of the fruit of the Spirit. Macrothumia is the Greek word. It's all Greek to me. Macrothumia is this word that in the Greek means patiently bearing heat without disintegrating. And Tyndale thought, well, how do I put that into English? And he said, I know, long-suffering, patiently bearing the heat without falling apart. Long-suffering. Good word, isn't it? And that word, long-suffering, macrothumia, it's also the word that was used in the Greek translations of Exodus chapter 34, here at the heart of God's name. God is, in Greek, macrothumia. In English, long-suffering. In Hebrew, the original language of Exodus chapter 32, it's a word, it's actually two words in the original Hebrew. The first word is the word for long. The second word is the word for nose. The nose or the nostrils are associated in the Bible with anger. And so, as often as not, the phrase is rendered slow to anger. You can imagine sort of the nostrils flaring in anger. And God is very slow to anger. He has a very long fuse. He is long-suffering. Although I do think that maybe we should have kept the sort of the Hebrew sense of long-nosed. As someone with a considerable proboscis of my own, I think sometimes maybe the godliness of big noses should be more affirmed in life. But anyway, I digress. The Most High here describes himself as long-nosed, or idiomatically long-suffering, or slow to anger. This is how he describes himself. He is merciful, gracious, forgiving, abounding in love and faithfulness. That phrase could actually be translated full of grace and truth. So these traits give us great confidence. But in these verses, he also mentions his justice. He will not clear the guilty. He will pay back iniquities, even to the third and fourth generation. So how do we put these things together? What does it look like to be long-suffering, but also to punish wickedness? And how do we know if we are the recipients of his patience or his punishment? And more fundamentally, how do we know that God is not doing here what we do in job interviews? Just making stuff up, sort of putting a mask on, showing us his best side. Because there are plenty of gods out there that claim to be kind, plenty of religious texts that speak of a merciful deity. How can we believe this one? Well, Moses knows the name of the Lord. He hasn't just heard God speak his name, he has seen the name, the character of the Lord in action. Back in Exodus chapter 23, God tells Moses about his angel who he will send ahead of the people. And according to Exodus 23 from verse 20, the angel leads and commands and forgives the people because God's name is in him. So Moses has seen the character of the Lord. The character of God Most High is perfectly expressed in his Son, in his presence, in his angel. And Moses has seen that character because he has witnessed firsthand the saving acts of the Lord Christ. And so after hearing the Father proclaim his name, Moses is overjoyed. Exodus 34 from verse 8, Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. Lord, he said, if I have found favor in your eyes, then let the Lord go with us. Lord, Father, let the Lord, the Son, continue to lead us. Moses has heard the name of the Father, and he has recognized that that is exactly the character of the Son who he has seen save him. And this is how we can be assured of the same character of God. You see, we see the name of the Lord in the saving acts of Christ. God does not merely describe himself from on high, he sends Christ among us to walk the talk. When we look at Christ crucified, how can we possibly deny the long-suffering mercy of God? There on the cross, Jesus is patiently bearing the heat himself. And at the same time, he is revealing his determination to judge. The name of God makes sense as we look to Christ. The punishment and the patience come together. And in the words of John chapter 1 verse 14, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus is the very character of God taking flesh. And if we see him for who he is, we too will bow to the ground like Moses and desire his company all our days. Plenty of gods claim to be glorious, but their glory does not look like this. Plenty of gods claim to be merciful, but we've never seen the evidence. With Jesus, we get something very different. In Jesus, we have seen the character of Almighty God. And when we see his arms outstretched to the guilty, who can doubt the depths of his divine long-suffering?